Hello, my fine DMO friends, and welcome back to episode two of what's the name of this show, Adam? Do you remember it?
Well, it originally was supposed to be Stu's News, but I think we ended up
Absolutely
settling
not.
on Destination Discourse.
Destination Discourse. Welcome back if you listened to episode one. Welcome if you are just tuning in for the first time. This is a sequel, Adam, and there's a lot of good sequels throughout the years, so hopefully we can live up to them. What happens to be your favorite sequel? I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, you are putting me on the spot.
Hmm.
I'll be honest, it's been very difficult for me to find sequels that I like because it's always so much buildup from the original that and I'm not really setting the table very well for this episode. But when I think about sequels, Star Wars, and you're gonna love this, which is not what I want here, but Star Wars seems to be one of the only franchises that can actually make the second, third, fourth movie live up to the quality of the first one. And so I'd say the best sequels I've seen are in the Star Wars franchise, unfortunately, because I know that gives you a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah, it does. But I will say I go against the grain that Empire Strikes Back is not the best of the original trilogy, and this is controversial. And it never was until the internet decided it was. Now everyone thinks Empire's the best. The true answer to this is Return of the Jedi is the best of the original Star Wars movies. And I have a whole theory on why that is, including a triple prong finale. And it's a long thing. So if you ever see me at a conference and you want to have a beer and chat about the intricacies of the Star Wars universe, happy to explain why Return of the Jedi is the best. But hopefully we can live up to expectations and we can deliver you a sequel worthy of its name and maybe not as dark as Empire Strikes Back, but we'll see. And hopefully we won't disappoint you like Adam just set us up to do so. But we'll, we'll see, huh? Now, Adam, on my screen, I'm recording this and it's showing you the whole time, not me. So I don't know if you're
Well,
seeing me when I'm talking.
Zoom's a really smart platform, Stuart,
Okay.
and I feel like it's just kind of intuitive and knows where the focus ought to be.
Okay. Let's hope that's the case. Otherwise, they're going to be looking at you the whole time and not me. But that's okay. Maybe you're better looking. So that's okay. So let's talk about what our topic is today. So we're going to be talking about something you and I have talked about at great length. In fact, we did what, 6 episodes of your podcast on this very topic, talking about branded entertainment and whether or not that is going to be the future of destination marketing. Because a lot is changing, but some things never will. And good storytelling is good storytelling. And it's, in my mind, storytelling is fundamentally our primary purpose as a DMO. We talked last week about how we exist to improve the quality of life for our residents. I think one of the main ways we do that, if not the quintessential way we do that, is through storytelling, and not just to our visitors, but I think the storytelling we tell to our residents, the storytelling we tell to our stakeholders, our elected officials, even to our team internally. I think that's probably the most important thing that we do. And so this branded entertainment is an offshoot of storytelling. So we're going to dig into that today. I think the one concern I have about this, Adam, is that you and I agree on 99% of this topic, and this is destination discourse, and we need to have a little bit of debate. So one of us may have to play the role of devil's advocate along the way, but we'll see. Stay tuned, see who that is.
I like it.
Um,
Yeah, I actually think I may even surprise you with some of my opinions here on this one. There's been some
okay.
evolution since last time we talked about
Well, I look forward to hearing how wrong you are, but we'll get into that in a little bit later. Before we do, though, it's everyone's favorite segment. Do you know what that is, Adam? It's Stu's News. You
Oh,
ready?
it is. It is.
Okay. Everyone's favorite segment. And this week, I got this article. We're going to put it in the show notes. This article came from Destinations International, and it's actually a case study. And I love case studies that surprise me, a little surprise and delight in this one. So, our neighbors here in South Carolina, in Greenville, came up with this novel concept for Christmas. And obviously December's a slower time of year for a lot of destinations, especially South destinations. I think people tend to go to cities a little more than the South. But we uh, we saw this article and we thought we needed to talk about this. So what they did is they leveraged nostalgia for an amazing Christmas tradition, Home Alone, right? And so they created a Home Alone experience at Christmas in Greenville where you could book a package which included a movie marathon of the Home Alone movies in a hotel room. They also brought you ice cream from one of their local places. It's Crazy Mason. We actually have one of those here in Myrtle Beach too. And then they also, after the movies, you got to take a limo ride and have cheese pizza in honor of Kevin McAllister. So this is a cool experience. They sold out every day that this was offered. They already have people that are saying that they want to come back for next year. But I think the coolest thing about this, and this is what I really loved about it and what resonated with me, is we're always looking for unique advertising and media opportunities that also earned media that get coverage from other media outlets. And this just got a ton of coverage because of the novelty of it and the fun. And then I think long term, what it's going to do is it's going to program people to start thinking of Greenville as a Christmas destination, right? Which is something new. And before this, I'd never thought of Greenville as a Christmas destination, but that's a long-term strategy to say, hey, you should come to Greenville. It's part of your new Christmas tradition. And over years or decades, that could make a meaningful, really significant impact on the destination. So love this concept. Not everyone could pull this off, but it's such a cool kernel of an idea that I think anyone can iterate off of. So what were your thoughts about this article, Adam?
Well, and one of the things you said at the end of that I'm a little concerned about is the idea that not everyone can pull this off. I I think, Greenville, for example, they were not featured in the Home Alone movie, right? They weren't part of the hotel where or no, excuse me, that's Home Alone 2 where Kevin's walking through a hotel. But there
Yeah,
was
New York.
nothing about that movie that relates to Greenville, South Carolina. And so the normal rules of destination think would say that Greenville is not the appropriate destination to have a Home Alone experience, right? What I love about this is that they thought differently, and I do think every destination has the ability to think outside of the norm, outside of what they've been doing in the past, and create unique experiences that have earned media value and that the news is willing to pick up and feature. And by understanding their audience, Greenville specifically, knowing who they want to target, which it sounds to me like with a Home Alone experience designed the way they designed it, it sounds like families was the target for families to come spend Christmas in Greenville. And by knowing their audience, they knew what appeals to that audience and what type of experience they could craft that would sell out. And I think all of us have the ability to do that in our destinations, to evaluate what our audience wants and build a custom and unique experience through collaboration with our stakeholders that not only is going to, be interesting to our audience, but is going to be valuable enough to where the news will want to cover it. So I think every destination is capable of something like this. It just takes thinking differently, collaborating with your stakeholders, and knowing your audience.
Yeah, and as a DMO, I think I look at this and sort of playing that devil's advocate role. I'm going to sit there and say, well, I've got limited resources and I can't play favorites with my individual investors or partners, right? And so this creates some challenges that they had to overcome because they had to coordinate with one hotel, one ice cream place, with one pizza restaurant, with one limousine company, right? So that now that's taking time to get these people on board, number one, but two, it potentially alienates other hotels, other investors. So they must have done, and I haven't talked to our friends there at Greenville about this, but I intend to. We meet up regularly with the what we call the Big Five in South Carolina. So that's Greenville, Charleston, Hilton Head, Columbia, and Myrtle Beach. And so we'll chat and share ideas. So next time I meet with those guys, I'm certainly going to talk about this and learn a little more about how they pulled it off. But I could see where, because we're risk adverse as DMOs, some people would shy away from this kind of idea. But I think if you sell the long-term vision, hey, we want to program people to thinking that Greenville is this holiday destination, and we want to create memories and nostalgia around people coming here and traditions that will last for decades. I think you could get individual hotels to say, okay, well, it's not us this year, but maybe we're going to build to us next year. And so it's sort of a rising tide mentality instead of an individualized mentality. That's where I think not every DMO can pull it off because not everyone's going to have the courage. I mean, I think they can, to your point, I think they're going to be reluctant to because they don't want to alienate some of their other partners.
Yeah, and just for fun, I'd love to kind of role play the pitch to the stakeholders for the destinations that are listening, right?
Okay,
And by the way, I'm not asking you to be like the angry stakeholder who doesn't want to do it. I'm just like I'm going to try to
I could
embody
probably
if
do that
I'm
pretty well.
yeah, you probably can. But if I'm embodying kind of my inner Heath Dillard here from Greenville, South Carolina, and really impressed with their team for pulling this off, what I'm going to the stakeholders and saying is listen, yes, this first year we may end up featuring a couple of stakeholders over the other ones. But the impact long term on the destination, if we can brand Greenville as a Christmas destination, every single one of you will benefit from that brand value because there's only so many rooms in the hotel we're featuring in year one. And on top of that, if you guys next year, excuse me, we're in South Carolina, y'all next year will grab onto this experience and build other Home Alone related components to the experience, everybody's going to be able to benefit from this. And instead of selling 80 packages, maybe by working together next year, we'll sell 300 packages and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. And so I think one of the issues for a lot of these destination leaders is that their stakeholders think on an annual basis and they look at P&L, everything on an annual basis. But if we can convince people to think beyond this year and understand the impact beyond this year, I think that's when you can really start to do things that are different than what's always been done. And that's kind of how I would structure my pitch if I was trying to get my stakeholders on board.
Yeah. Well, you did a good job convincing this grumpy old stakeholder. I think I would agree 100% that that's a good strategy. And, I'm not the one that invented this analogy. A lot of people have used it, some even in this industry, but we talk a lot at Myrtle Beach about the building cathedrals concept. And so, if you think back into when cathedrals were often built, it would take hundreds of years, multiple generations of stonemasons and master craftsmen to finish a cathedral. And the folks that began and laid the first foundational bricks weren't even alive to see the full product come to fruition. And so we've got to start thinking that way as DMOs. I think we if we talk about that analogy, we say, okay, we have a vision in mind. We know what this beautiful structure or project is going to look like long term. In this case, it could be we want to be known as a holiday destination. What are the foundational bricks we can lay this year and build upon next year and beyond, even beyond our administration, but if you set that North Star of a beautiful cathedral and say, we're going to build deliberately brick by brick towards that, you get so much alignment behind that. That's how we've been able to really disrupt some areas of the industry. We couldn't have done some of the branded entertainment projects we've done without having a vision of becoming a lifestyle brand. We couldn't have really embraced data the way we have without having this long-term vision of a CDP where we can have one-to-one communications with every visitor that comes to Myrtle Beach. And there's several others where we're strategically aligned with not just internally and with our stakeholders, but also with our agency partners, where we know where we want to get to, and everyone is working in alignment to get to that. And so I think that's what Greenville, I hope that's what Greenville are doing. I would assume that's what they're doing. It's brilliant if they are. So hats off to them. They definitely get a tip of the hat today.
Can I add one more thing
So
there, Stuart? I
yeah,
I think it's important for everybody that's listening to understand too. You don't have to sacrifice short-term gains to think long-term. I mean, the great example here with Greenville is even though they were thinking long-term for this first year package, they still sold out. They still generated the economic impact that they needed to generate. I think one question, if I was to push back a little bit on uh, Greenville's strategy here, and this may tie into where we're headed with the conversation. I see that they have a section in the case study, and I encourage everybody to go read the case study because it's awesome. But they have a section where they talk about owned media and the views they got. So they got 22,000 page views from 16,600 users, and then 8,800 direct referrals to the Westin Poinsets booking platform. I think I would suggest expanding when you create an experience like this that has so much uniqueness, where you could follow a family as they see those crazy Mason shakes, which if you've ever seen those crazy Mason shakes, I know you have, but for the audience that's listening,
Hmm.
my family was blown away. In fact, maybe I'll send you, Stuart, some of the pictures that we have from the Crazy Mason when we had it for the first time, and just the wild shakes that you get. But there's so much content opportunity there with very little or incremental cost associated with capturing that content. My hope
Hmm.
is that somebody that's doing an experience like this, and that maybe Greenville, if they were to do this again, would do a ton of content creation around the experience so that they can actually leverage that content as they continue to build this concept for future years. And maybe
Yeah.
they did. I don't have enough information to know if they did or didn't, but on the site, it only talks about website visits.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't know that they did or didn't either. I haven't looked at any of their social media to see, but I would hope they captured some to leverage for promotion for sure. But I think more importantly, and we're moving in this direction in a big way. We believe that, we've talked, you and I, off outside of the show a lot about how the DMOs aren't the hero of the story, right? The visitors are the hero of the story, and prospective visitors should see themselves reflected. And so I think the real opportunity here is leveraging the content that can be produced, not just by the DMO, but from the visitors that are experiencing this. And especially if you can create and gamify it in a way where there's incentives for people to post that content to their fans and friends and followers. That's where it's really going to take off, because not only are you directly programming the people visiting you that Greenville is now a place for holidays, you're also programming every one of their friends and families. And we know from experience that people tend to be tribal. They tend to follow and like and be friends and family with people that are similar to them, and similar values or similar interests or similar geography. And therefore, those people are very high likelihood to be your next potential visitors. And so you're not just programming the visitors, but also everyone else that Greenville is this holiday destination and needs to be a part. So that fear of missing out, that seeing your friends do something, creates that envy within their friends and followers that they're going to want to do it next year, and it just drives demand. So I think leveraging the content through storytelling is certainly the evolution of this, and I would assume that's what Greenville are planning to do. So let's segue into our topic today. So we're going to talk about storytelling now. I wrote an article for this new website. I don't know if you've heard of it, Adam. It's called Tourism IQ. It's mytourismiq.com. Are you familiar with this site at
Heard of
all?
it. Heard of it.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, the joke that Adam was the creator of this site, and we talked about it in last episode, but it's really a town hall for the DMO world to come and meet and share ideas, and maybe challenge the status quo a little bit. And so Adam was harassing me for months to write an article for it, and so finally I did. And Adam liked it so much that he wanted us to talk about it today on this episode. So the article I wrote was about how branded entertainment and storytelling were really potentially the future of destination marketing. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. That's what Adam's going to talk about. We'll see where it goes. Now, we have talked about this before. We'll link to my article in the show notes. At the bottom of that article are also links to the 6 episodes that Adam and I did on his podcast, the Destination Marketing Podcast, over a year ago, a year and a half ago now.
Yeah.
I haven't gone back and listened to those, so some of it might be dated. That's 18 months ago, but I think some of the fundamentals stand true. We've probably evolved a little bit in some of our opinions, but Adam, where do you want to start in this big animal of storytelling and branded entertainment?
Boy, it's a big topic, and it's something I'm really passionate about, Stuart. I think where I want to start is as we look at the destination space, and I know that there's outliers to this, but if we look at like the en masse, most DMOs have an annual strategy, and we touched on that during Stu's news earlier, where they look at everything in year to year increments, and there's not a lot of bleed over from one year into the next because their stakeholders want annual results. And so the easy thing to do, or the natural thing to do for a DMO, is to build these annual plans. And what that usually ends up with is a creative headline with a beautiful picture and a call to action for you to book your trip today. You go show your stakeholders like it because you're asking people to visit. But what's happening there is that we are missing consumer behavior and how consumers are making decisions today. And that in most cases, paid ads are not enough to provide the value for consumers to make a decision. Consumers are expecting more value than just the fact that you were willing to pay to be in front of them, and so the in addition, I think paid media is getting more and more expensive, and all of that is causing most destinations have the same plan, and I think they have the luxury of not knowing the return on investment because of the way our data is structured in the industry. And so what that leads to is kind of the same thing over and over and over again for multiple destinations. And you could even trade out the logo and the headline on some destinations, and you wouldn't know which destination it was because a lot of destinations have similar assets. And so when you combine the sameness, the sea of sameness that we experience in the destination marketing industry with the what's happening on a macro level with consumer decision making and how they're expecting more value than just paid media to make a decision, we're running into a scenario where I think if destinations don't change the way they're looking at their marketing, there's going to be some sort of massive failure event where destinations are exposed for not innovating or adapting with the marketplace. And I think it's really critical that destinations understand not just stakeholder incentives, but consumer behavior and structure your marketing plans around consumer behavior and not just continue with this inflationary strategy of using paid media as your major distribution strategy for a mediocre campaign.
Wow. And so in this show, this is called Destination Discourse, right? So we're going to be a little heavy-handed at time, and we're gonna be argumentative at times, and we're gonna probably be a little critical of the destination marketing industry at times. But I want everyone listening to understand this is a love letter to the industry, right? We're not dogging on the industry for the sake of it. This is a love letter because we know this industry is made up of the most creative and sincere and generous and friendly people, and the systems that we've created and that we work within have created this risk adversity, this homogeneity. Like there's a lot of things that could be better, and we hope that this show in part is a catalyst for that change. So please don't take this criticism as anything other than a love letter to the industry, because that's how it's intended. So we hope that that's how it's received. But I couldn't agree with you more, Adam. I think it may be even a little bit worse in terms of the lack of effectiveness of paid media over time. Like we know anyone that runs any substantial paid media over time sees that it is getting more expensive. It's getting harder to target people. The big players, the gatekeepers, if you will, are getting more and more. They're getting larger, and therefore they're having more monopolies on their audiences in limiting who you can talk to unless you pay them even more. On top of that, the you talked about the behavior of consumers. People increasingly are rejecting advertising in its traditional form. They're increasingly becoming more fragmented in their media consumption. They're increasingly distracted and using multiple devices at a time. So even if you're running a TV spot, they're probably looking at their phone. So that on top of all the privacy restrictions that are coming in, that on top of all the disruption from AI, I think we're on a path to where paid media in its traditional form, where I just pump out a generic ad that says visit Myrtle Beach, is not going to work. I mean, I would argue that it's working less today than it has last year and the year before. And if that trend continues, it's going to get to the point where it's just not sustainable. And we'll be pumping millions of dollars as an industry, hundreds of millions of dollars as an industry into this bucket that just doesn't have holes in it anymore. It just doesn't have a bottom. The money's going to go right through. And so we have to evolve. We have to really shift from this 90% of our budget being, or whatever it is, 80-90% of our budget on paid media, that has to begin to shift to owned and earned media. And I think you need paid media still. I'm not saying you don't, but I think there's a better way to invest paid media to become an annuity by doing better storytelling, creating great stories, creating branded entertainment that people will want to consume, they'll choose to consume, and they'll talk about it. So there you get the owned and the shared media and all the other stuff as well. You could use paid media to catalyze that, and because the hardest part is still building an audience. But paid media for the sake of paid media, I think, is going to go the way of the dodo.
Yeah, and there's a couple things to note. Number one is there's a difference between creating demand and capturing existing demand. If people already are looking for your destination or experiences within your destination and are searching those terms, capturing that existing demand, I think paid media does a great job of that, especially as it pertains to search advertising, or if you can recognize through someone's behavior that they're close to buying. I think purchase level ads make a lot of sense in that scenario. So paid media, by all means, I think is still relevant there. But the second
So
step
I'd
is,
argue a little bit on that, though, right?
yeah, hit me.
Because I think we have to have a conversation as an industry and say, what is the role of the DMO? And that might be different for different DMOs, but is harvesting intent to travel to your destination, is that the role of the DMO, or is that the role of the stakeholders in the destination? I would argue that yes and no. It depends on your structure, right? But our primary job, in my opinion, is to create demand, and we do that by shaping people's feelings, their thoughts, and their behaviors. And I think storytelling is the best way to do that. But I don't think, like, for example, we don't spend money hardly at all, if ever, on Myrtle Beach related keywords on Google. That intent of people to stay. Where we might spend it on Google paid ads is if someone's looking for South Carolina and they haven't selected that destination, or if they're looking for a generic beach destination. So I think there is an argument for harvesting the intent to travel, but I think you got to decide where you sit on that spectrum. And again, it's going to be different for different destinations.
Yeah.
But just
Would
an
you
important
say
caveat.
would you say that Myrtle Beach is unique in that? Because I think most stakeholders in that meeting where the destination is presenting, here was our impact for the year, stakeholders are asking, okay, well, for all that money you spent on paid media, what do you have to show for it? How can you prove the value that you brought? What's our return on investment? And I don't know if destinations can successfully tell that story to their stakeholders without harvesting intent, at least on a grand
But
scale in the industry.
well, we can certainly tip our thumb on the scale to make ourselves look good, right? We could all dump all our money into brand keywords and look like super successful, and we'd get away with it for a year or two. At the end of the day, you don't put clicks in the bank, right? You put money in the bank, and if these hotels that are seeing, hey, an increasing percentage of my business is coming from the DMO, but there's not extra people, there's no new people coming to our destination. At some point, the clock runs out and you get caught, and that's when you get defunded, and that's when you cease to be, right? You become a dead parrot, you cease to be. And so that's a Monty Python reference. But you look blank at me when I said that. So
I
it
definitely
is no more.
I
You
missed the
cease to
Monty
be.
Python era, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, we're gonna have to correct that. We might do a later episode on Monty Python. But I think it's about balancing that short term success with long term existence. And so there is an element of harvesting intent, but I think you can do that organically. I think you can do that without paying dollars. Like, I've heard stories where literally there was a DMO that spent over $10 million on branded keywords to generate about $6 million in revenue for directly to their stakeholders. It's like, okay, those stakeholders were glad they got that $6 million, but you spent $10 million. Like, that's a net loss to your community. And as a DMO, our responsibility is to the taxpayer. Our responsibility is to be a steward of that budget. And I would argue that's not doing it. So,
Well, and I'm going to switch sides of the argument now, and because I really feel like what you just said is really important. Not only did somebody spend $10 million to capture intent that was already coming, but they may have redirected travel decisions from one stakeholder to another by competing with those keywords. And so if somebody was about
Yeah.
to transact with a specific stakeholder, but the DMO was bidding on that competitive keyword, then they went and did research and discovered that they'd rather attend a different stakeholder. If I'm the one that lost that sale, I'm pretty upset with
Hmm.
the DMO for spending that money competitively.
Yeah. Yeah. You're competing with your stakeholders at that point. So, we've gone off on a random tangent. I think it's an important conversation though, because I think how we invest our money um, is a question we all ask ourselves. And I think too many destinations think about the short term implications of how they invest their money. And so what we're talking about with branded entertainment is a long term strategy. You cannot have overnight success with a branded entertainment strategy. And so I want to go off on a little story here, if I may, if you
Yeah.
indulge me, because one of the things that we get criticized for is when I'm talking about branded entertainment, I talk a lot about the TV shows or these elaborate podcasts that we've spent significant budget on, right? And Model Beach is well funded. We plenty of resources. We have a decent sized team. So not every DMO is in that position. So I want to take you back to about 15 years ago when I worked on the dark side as an agency. I ran a digital agency for the hotel side, and we were a small agency. We had about 20 employees, and we were very regional. We had a lot of hotel clients, but they were all in our sort of vicinity, let's say. And we wanted more, but we didn't have a budget to advertise. And so what we did is we decided we were having some amazing conversations internally about how to do a better job of marketing hotels. And so we decided that we would start a podcast. And so we went out and we spent $80. We bought a Yeti microphone and we put it in the middle of a table. And we just started recording these conversations. And the first episodes, like these ones, were a little rough, but gradually we refined our skills and we became, fairly popular. It took us 6 years to really to grow the audience to where it ended up. But by the end of it, we had thousands and thousands of of hotels listening to that podcast. And every episode was focused on two things. We said we want it to be entertaining and we want it to be helpful. So everyone can take something from it and apply it to their business each time. And those were the guiding principles. Everything else, kind of sort of meandered and we changed some things, but we kept those guiding principles from day one. And so we spent $80 originally. About a year into it, we spent another $400 on equipment. We never spent a dime to advertise it. And by the end, by the 6 years before I left the agency, it had turned us into a national, international agency. We ended up having a substantially bigger client roster, substantially more employees. Our revenue was substantially higher. And every one of our new business opportunities came as a lead through the podcast. We didn't spend a penny on any other advertising. And we ended up selling that agency for a decent amount of money. So the ROI on that $80 investment was significant, but it did take commitment, time commitment from me and the team. It was 2 or 3 hours a week of investment of time, but we never had to spend a lot of money. So I think branded entertainment in that regard can be inexpensive, but you have to commit, you have to prioritize. And I think that's where people get caught up. They say, I want to do a podcast, I want to do this new series on social media, but I don't have the time. The reality is you have the time, you're choosing not to prioritize this in your schedule, right? Because we all have decisions to make about where we spend our time. And if you really look at how you spend the 40 hours a week or 60 hours you might work, there are things in there that you need a question and say, well, if I didn't do these two things, this 2 hours each week, is it really going to make a difference to my destination? And you need to have that hard conversation with yourself and say, yeah, I could cut that for 6 months and see what happens and reinvest it into something that is building to the long term. That's what we did at Fuel, was the agency that we ran. And I got to say, it was probably the smartest decision, certainly the best investment we ever made.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how you and I ended up meeting, was that I've had a very similar strategy to what you did at Fuel, but for the DMO space, right? Built the destination marketing podcast, built that audience over time, and now have leads coming in from people that I've never personally met but have listened to the show. Got an RFP this morning from somebody that I've actually never had the opportunity to meet in person. And so I think, we both have experienced this for ourselves, but I want to talk about destination applications specifically. And you did something in Myrtle Beach that it's one of the, and by the way, I don't like complimenting Stuart, so this is hard for me. I'm going to do my best here to keep a straight face. But you guys have done one of the most brilliant campaigns that I've ever seen in the tourism industry, and it culminated into this TV show called Traveling the Spectrum. And I'm wondering if you could give us a brief background of it, and then we can talk a little bit about what we've been able to accomplish together with this show.
Yeah, so thank you for the compliment, but it was really a team effort, and I'm standing on the shoulders of some giants that have paved the way for this. But so I absolutely don't want to take the credit, and I don't tell this story to brag about Myrtle Beach. Although obviously we want everyone listening and watching to come to Myrtle Beach. That's not what this show is for. The show is to try to help. Like I said, it's a love letter to the industry that we believe we can all do better. So several years ago, about a decade ago, a lady called Becky Lodge moved to the Myrtle Beach area, and she has a son on the autism spectrum, and she found that there was a lack of resources here. And so she started becoming an advocate, created an organization called Champion Autism Network, and started doing a ton of work to educate people in our community on the challenges associated with autism, and really trying to create resources for people living with autism and their families. So fast forward 10 years, I came on as the DMO, and I sort of came in and saw all this amazing work that she was doing. The DMO had already started working with her to do things like training our frontline workers on how to recognize autism, how to accommodate autism, and other neurodiversity. And so we, over the course of a decade, we've trained over 150 businesses, restaurants, attractions, accommodations. That's over 2,000 frontline workers that have been trained over that time. And we've encouraged them to offer specific experiences for people with neurodiversity. And that might be like our aquarium can open early, an hour earlier, so you can enjoy it with fewer crowds. The lights are up, the music's down, things like that. They'll hold, our local movie theaters will hold performances of movies where the lights are up and the kids can wander around. Our local symphony did the same thing. They did a sensory friendly thing. So we created this experience here that is very autism friendly. Some of the hotels that participate will allow you to check in from your car, so you don't have to get out and go to the lobby. Some of the restaurants will bring you your check as soon as you've ordered and bring your food in to-go boxes. So if you ever need to just scoot, you can. So there's a lot of accommodations that just reduce the friction. When I joined, we saw that I found the stat that IBCCES had commissioned a study back in 2019 that said 87% of families who have a kid on the spectrum don't take family vacations, and that broke my heart. And I said we're gonna change this narrative, not just for Myrtle Beach, but globally. We want to change this narrative. So we started thinking about how can we do that. And so a couple of projects came out of it. One was a children's book that we've created, which is now published. You can go to, if you Google White Garment, it's a publisher. They're selling that book. It's called Splish Splash Squawk. It's an amazing book. It's selling really well. And more importantly, it's helping a lot of people. And it follows a handful of kiddos who are traveling and experiencing some kind of sensory frustration. And then the book sort of helps them cope with the stress and overcome it, gives them coping techniques. It's a really cute book. And whether your kid has neurodiversity or just a little bit of anxiety, it's a really cute book if you're planning on traveling. But it wasn't promoting Myrtle Beach at all. It happened to be set in Myrtle Beach. And that's what we're doing with our branded entertainment. We want the background to be Myrtle Beach, but we want the story to be focused on the people. We believe story is about people, passion, and purpose. So we wanted to take this to the next level. And that culminated in the project that you're talking about, which is Traveling the Spectrum. And so last year, we brought 3 families, each with a different sort of situation going on related to autism spectrum disorder. And we brought them to Myrtle Beach. They had a vacation, and we documented the good, the bad, and the meltdowns. And we shot 6 episodes. It's all being edited. Each episode follows all three families throughout their journey. And the transformation that these families had through travel was so transformational for me to watch. It made me appreciate travel more. It made me appreciate family more. It made me look at the world a little bit differently. And so we haven't announced yet. I almost let it slip. We haven't announced yet where it's going to be, but it has been picked up to be on a major streaming platform later this year. And so I'm hoping in the next couple of episodes of this we can actually announce where that's going to be. But this is going to be a show that I think the DMO world is going to look at and say, oh, we can do something a little bigger and better and different than we've done before, because not only is this a documentary that isn't about Myrtle Beach, it's about travel. We're getting paid by, and I almost said the streaming service, we're getting paid by the distribution for distributing this. So this isn't a paid advertisement. This is true content that happens to be set in Myrtle Beach. And I think that's a game changer, because we've seen content before do really well. In Florida, we visit Florida on the coast of Florida. Was it I forget what destination it was now. That's terrible of me. But they did Life's Rewards, right? With the Odyssey Studios and Miles, they did Life's Rewards.
Wasn't that
Down in
Sarasota?
Florida. It may have been. I don't remember, but it was an Amazon Prime show, and I remember that it came out right when I joined Visit Myrtle Beach in 2001, and so it inspired me in a lot of ways, because I was like, oh, DMOs can create content that's actually entertaining, and we don't have to just be an advertisement that looks the same as everyone else and be so generic. And so that was a big inspiration for me. But we took the sort of autism concept and thought, what can we really do to take this and DMO marketing to the next level? So that's a form of storytelling, which I don't think many DMOs are doing, because they all want to promote. And storytelling isn't about promoting yourself, right? We are not the heroes of the story. We're the guides of the story, or in some cases, we're just the backdrop of the story.
Yep.
We're not even the guides, And so I think this is going to be transformational for Myrtle Beach. I think people are going to see this. They'll look at Myrtle Beach differently. I think our local community is going to be so proud of it. But I think most importantly, it's going to show the travel industry what can be done. But even more importantly than that, I said most importantly for the last one, but more importantly than that, it's going to unlock travel for the 75 million people living with autism. And a lot of those aren't traveling. And so I think this is it's certainly the project I'm most proud of in my entire career. If I retired tomorrow, I would be a happy man, other than, not having money coming in. I'd be a happy man and say I accomplished something, because it is that good. And it wasn't me, it was a whole team, but it's been a fun project for sure.
So let's talk about that for destinations that are listening, because and by the way, kudos on such an incredible initiative and execution of the initiative. And I can't wait till we can announce where it was picked up. But I think there's some important components of this for destinations that are listening. Number one is, most destinations will say, well, I don't have the budget to create something like this. And my answer to that would be, you're right, because you're spending it all on paid media. And so number one is, traveling the spectrum is a great example. You went through the investment of creating the asset. And this is something that can benefit and generate visitation to Myrtle Beach for the next 10, 15 years. Same with Splish Splash Squawk, the children's book. That book is going to be in circulation for years and years and years. So I want, as everybody thinks about how to execute on branded entertainment, yes, to create the initial asset is more expensive, especially compared to the creative that you've been developing for your paid media campaigns. The difference is that this asset is usable for multiple years, and it can be sliced up into bite-sized pieces and used to get people to consume the major asset, or what I like to describe it as the pillar. And so we talk about creating content pillars and then creating content slices from that pillar that will drive people to go consume it. And then you are using that to build a long-term relationship with consumers that want more value than just a paid ad anyway. The value you're providing is, for one, you feel good watching Traveling the Spectrum. And I can I can say that from experience. You feel good when you're watching the show and seeing the changes that are happening in these people's lives. And if you go look at the Instagram pages, you'll actually see the slices that we've done that give you a brief feeling and encourage you to want to go watch the entire show. So we make people feel good. We showcase Myrtle Beach. And we give them a mission to attach to, because the fact that 87% of these families that have a child with autism don't travel is a huge issue. And to be able to demonstrate that that can change, it invites everyone to be a part of the mission. And so by creating a valuable asset like Traveling the Spectrum, like Splish Splash Squawk, and other assets, you can build a much stronger relationship with your visitor than you ever could by throwing an ad in front of them with a creative headline and a pretty picture that says, book your trip today.
Yeah. And I think, if we're thinking long term, what we want to do is ultimately we want to create an audience for whatever content we're pushing out. And this could have been done on a much smaller scale, much smaller budget on social media. You could easily have brought in a couple of families and paid, work with your partners to cover the cost, so there's no budgetary impact to you. Maybe the flight, or you get them to drive there, but you could get the accommodations comped by a stakeholder, you could get their restaurants comped. So it doesn't have to be a big budget to bring a family in. And then you can just talk to them, just have your iPhone in front of them and talk to them about their experience. You could have done this on a very slim budget and maybe not had the reach that we're going to have with a streaming platform, but you could have certainly had an impact with your local community and with these families. So I think you can do it on a smaller scale for sure. But I think our job here and what we're trying to do with this branded entertainment concept is we want to build an audience. If we can build an audience that's a positive audience that believes something, is passionate about something that we stand for, then we can create a community. If we can create a community, then we can have influence on people's thoughts, feelings, and their behaviors. And if we can do that, now we can either turn those people, our community, into advocates for our destination, which will lead to new potential audience, or we convert them into visitors, right? So that's sort of the long-term thinking and why I think branded entertainment is going to be so valuable. But one of the things we've learned along the way is that the content piece is the easy part. So you got to do that. You got to create great content. You got to really focus on great storytelling. Then the hard part is building the audience, and you got to be super consistent and super persistent to be able to create that audience. And so there's more of that. There's more details and specifics in this article on Tourism IQ. So I'll definitely link to that in the show notes. But Adam, we're running out of time for today's show. I did want to give a tease. We've got an awesome episode coming up either in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to have our friend Will Seacombe on, who was with Visit Florida. And by the way, it came to me while we were talking. The show Life's Rewards was St. Pete Clearwater.
That's
where
right.
It was. So hats off to St. Pete Clearwater. So Will Seacombe used to be with Visit Florida, and we're going to be talking about a topic that I know you are going to love, Adam. We're going to be talking about why DMOs don't take risks. And for anyone that knows Will, you'll know why Will's one of the best, most qualified people in the industry to talk about why DMOs don't take risks, because he certainly took some risks, and there were some pretty severe consequences from that. So we're going to be talking about that in an upcoming episode. But Adam, this has been great conversation today. This is your opportunity to plug whatever you want to plug. If you want to plug your show, you want to plug your relic, whatever you want to plug. But here's a caveat: you've got to do it with an accent, and you can only plug one of them.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Please go sign up on Tourism IQ. And I don't know if that was Australian, Southern. I don't know, but that's what I've got.
It started English. It got a little Australian at the end. I think there was some Southern in the middle. That was amazing. And they can also hit you up on LinkedIn, right? You're Adam Stoker on LinkedIn. So
absolutely
go and let him know how much you loved his accent or were offended by his accent, because I know I was. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Stuart Butler. You can also look at all the amazing things that Myrtle Beach has to offer, including the very first ever Crazy Mason, which started right here in Myrtle Beach, on visitmyrtlebeach.com. So go check that out. But until next time, you've been watching or listening to Destination Discourse.
Thanks, everybody.